On September 16, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice Richardson was a recent Cal State Fullerton graduate. She was bright, creative, and full of life. She had competed in beauty pageants, interned with a forensic psychologist, and worked various jobs. Friends and family described her as outgoing and responsible. But in the weeks leading up to that night, something was off. She had recently gone through a breakup. Her behavior had grown erratic. She was sending strange text messages and leaving odd notes. Some close to her believed she was struggling with bipolar disorder or a mental health crisis. Others close to her disputed that she had a diagnosed illness. That evening, Mitrice drove her white Honda Civic from the South Los Angeles area all the way out to Jeffrey's, an upscale restaurant on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. She was far from home. Witnesses said she behaved strangely. She allegedly joined a table of strangers, ordered expensive food including Kobe beef she could not pay for, and made unusual comments, including something about avenging the death of Michael Jackson. When the roughly $89 bill came and she could not cover it, staff called the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Deputies arrived. They arrested Mitrice for defrauding an innkeeper. A search of her car turned up a small amount of marijuana. Her car was impounded. Inside were her purse, cell phone, and other belongings. At the station, Mitrice was booked. Her mother, Latice Sutton, called multiple times. She expressed serious concern about her daughter's mental state and begged them not to release her alone in the middle of the night in an unfamiliar, remote area. Station personnel reportedly assured her that Mitrice would be held until morning. Mitrice herself was asked about mental health issues and reportedly said she had none, though prescription bottles and an inhaler were among items associated with her. Despite the mother's pleas and the assurances given, Mitrice was released shortly after midnight on September 17, 2009, around 12:15 to 12:28 a.m. She left with only the clothes she was wearing: a shirt, jeans, a brown hat, a pink belt, 2 keys, and her driver's license. No money, no cell phone, no purse, no car, no ride. The station was not served by late-night buses. The nearest open businesses were a distance away. She was offered the chance to stay in the lobby until morning but declined. She signed a promise to appear in court and walked out into the darkness of the Santa Monica Mountains. Hours later, around 6:30 a.m., a man named Bill Smith, a former news anchor living in the Montanito area, saw a young black woman matching Mitrice's description in his backyard. She appeared to be resting on the rear steps or nearby. When he asked if she was okay, she replied that she was just resting. Smith called the sheriff's department. By the time deputies arrived, she was gone. Tracks from sneakers were found but quickly lost. There were reports of additional possible sightings of a woman matching her description in the area that morning. Mitrice never made it home. She was reported missing. Massive searches followed involving law enforcement, volunteers, helicopters, dogs, and horses. They covered dozens of square miles of rugged canyon terrain. There were false sightings, including a widely publicized one in Las Vegas that led nowhere. Residents in the Montanito and Dark Canyon area later reported hearing screams on some nights after she vanished, but nothing concrete emerged at the time. 11 months later, on August 9, 2010, California State Park Rangers and Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority personnel were hiking in a remote section of Dark Canyon. They were checking on an old illegal marijuana grow site previously linked to cartel activity. Instead of plants, they found human remains, partially mummified skeletal remains of a young woman, naked, with the skull and spine detached. Clothing items including jeans, a belt, and a bra were scattered nearby. Other items of clothing she had been wearing, including her shirt and Vans sneakers, were never recovered. The location was only a few miles from where she had last been seen and roughly 6 to 8 miles from the sheriff's station. What happened next added another layer of controversy. Sheriff's deputies and search and rescue personnel were airlifted to the site. Despite instructions from the coroner's office not to disturb the remains, the bones were collected, bagged, and flown out that day. The following day, the coroner's team had difficulty locating the exact site, reportedly after forgetting a GPS device, and more bones were found in later searches. The handling of the scene drew sharp criticism for potential destruction of evidence and chain of custody issues. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office was never able to determine a cause or manner of death. There was no clear evidence of antemortem trauma on the bones that were recovered. The hyoid bone, which can be relevant in cases of possible strangulation, was never found. Toxicology was impossible due to the condition of the remains. Officials publicly stated there was no evidence of foul play. The family and many observers strongly disagreed. Mitrice's parents sued Los Angeles County over the handling of her arrest, release, and the investigation. In 2011, they reached a private settlement of $900,000. Policy changes around releases of people in vulnerable states were discussed, but the core questions remained unanswered. Then in 2024, the podcast Lost Hills, Dark Canyon, hosted by journalist Dana Goodyear, brought renewed attention. The series focused on a local Montenegro man named Rick Forsberg, also known as Richard Wayne Forsberg. Forsberg had a history of substance abuse and violence against women. He lived for a time in a makeshift camp or fort in the woods near the area where Mitrice was last seen and where her remains were later found. According to accounts in the podcast, there were claims he may have encountered Mitrice or even given her a ride on his motorcycle around the time she disappeared. Investigators had spoken with him years earlier. He reportedly passed a polygraph and was not charged. The podcast also described a collection of women's undergarments found at his campsite that was turned over to authorities. Forsberg died in 2019. The information remains circumstantial. As of recent years, Los Angeles County has repeatedly re-established and increased a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone responsible for Mitrice's suspicious disappearance and death. The amount has stood at $20,000 and was increased to $25,000. Local municipalities have offered additional reward money. The case remains officially unsolved. The manner of death is still listed as undetermined. Mitrice Richardson left a station in the middle of the night with almost nothing. She was seen once more at dawn. Then she vanished into the canyons. Nearly a year later, her remains were found. More than 15 years later, her family and those who followed the case still ask the same questions. Why was she released alone into that remote area despite clear signs of distress and her mother's pleas? What happened in the hours and days after she was last seen? Was it a tragic accident, exposure, a mental health crisis that led her deep into dangerous terrain, or something far more sinister? If you have any information about the disappearance or death of Mitrice Richardson, contact the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department or Crime Stoppers. Even after all this time, a tip could finally bring answers. This is the story of Mitrice Richardson, still unsolved.